Well, I'm Walter, excuse me, Eugene Ledgerwood, but I'm known as Bud Ledgerwood to everybody. And I have a hangar here on LaPorte Airport that we built years ago. And when you build a hangar at the airport here and put your money in it, you get to use it for so many years, then give it to the city, which is a good investment for both the airport and you. And so that's the story there. Now, what other kind of questions you
Why don't you tell us, how did you get interested in aviation? What was that moment that you thought, I want to learn to fly?
Well, that was interesting because I was born in 1929, and all these lights at every airport was put in by the government was for airmail. And we have one of them here ourselves, and it's still existing today, built in 1928, 9, and something like that. And we were poor dirt farmers, as everybody was. And I remember at night when I was 4 or 5 years old, I seen a light go across the ceiling at night when I was sleeping. There was no electricity, so when got dark, you went to bed. When it got up, daylight, or the crow flies in the morning, you get up. Well, this light flashing across the ceiling amazed me. I had to find out what it was. Finally, my dad took me and showed me what it was. And so I got interested in aviation then. And being a dirt farmer, I lived with my grandpa in the summertime, and we all lived out there with no electricity or refrigeration or anything like that. And so the O'Neill Airport at Benson's had training area over the farm, and we watched airplanes fly around. So my interest started then, and it stayed to today. I've had 4 or 5 different airplanes, still got 1.5. The 1.5 is sitting over there in the hangar now, and I'll never fly it again. But I've had it since 1970. Probably the record for rocket living, and I don't know, I've been joking that Oshkosh that I've had that airplane for so many years and did so many things with it that they can't believe it, that anybody else could beat that, because nobody's that stupid. It's a slow machine, but a lot of tanks, a lot of gas, so you didn't have to land every 200 miles to gas up. And so when the airport here started to progress, I was part of it. And ultimately became manager, part-time manager they called it, and then I went into full-time manager. And I retired here 16, 18 years later, and that's about it.
So how did you actually get your flying license, your pilot's license?
My license? I lived in Indianapolis at that time. We had moved up there and I was a teenager, and for $5 you could fly a J3 Cub or T-Craft for a half-hour instruction. So I started that, and it took me 2 years ground school and learning to fly, which we bought the first airplane at that time before I got my license even. And it was made it was a Ronca, just like the one I've got now, but before the war. And then after World War II, oil companies bought them and trained their people to fly them. And then, of course, when the airplanes progressed, making of them got better, they sold it off, and I bought it, me and my brother, and I don't know how we ever come up with $600 at that time, but we did. And that's where I got my license. And that same airplane today is hanging in the Cincinnati Ghost of War Museum right now, by chance. when I sold it, it was a disabled airplane and all that stuff. And that was chancy too, because I found out about that by accident. My first airplane still hanging down there. And it's made by the same company as this one that's sitting over at the hangar right now that's got over 3,400 hours put on it. And I just flew as when I could forever during the 4 years, the 4 airplanes that I had owned at that time. And I flew for everybody else. It got to the point that that if a new pilot got a license and got his own airplane and did all of his stuff, he didn't know anything about what you really know about flying. So they wanted me, or they would suit me, to go talk to him, fly with him, teach him how to handle emergencies, power outages, and unofficial. So I did a lot of that. And of course, when Ed Volk got to this point that they needed an airport manager because it was all contracted work, they chose me, which is natural. The oldest one in the airport and been in aviation forever. And when I got my license, my written examination was 1.5 pages, and you didn't have to have any radio experience, but you wasn't legal to fly radio. You had to get more training for that, even after you had your own license. And I still own my original license put out by the CAA, not the FAA. And that's caused a lot of conversation with the officials, the FAA, when we have meetings, when I show them my original license. But anyway, any other questions?
Yeah, tell us about the plane you own now. It's a Champ, right?
Chief.
It's a Chief. Okay, tell us about
It's
that.
a Chief. I bought it in 1970, and it's got 3,444 hours of me sitting in it. And it's on the third engine. And 1970, it's many, many, many years. I don't fly it anymore. I stopped flying it when I was 88. I'm 91 now, so I think it's time to hang it up.
Where would you take your planes? Did you just like go to breakfast and
Well, I belong to a group in Fort Wayne called EAA Chapter 2, and it was EAA chapters, one of the oldest chapters, and they had their monthly meetings and dinners and stuff like that, and I worked that market also, so I hung around there at that airport when I was overnight over there, and 2 of them volunteered to take an airplane, an old-fashioned airplane like mine, and fly it to Texas, that they would pay their way. But another one wanted to go with him, pay his own way, so they did. And they kept track of this. I thought this was an interesting story about what they did, what it cost, and how cheap it was to do it that way. And when they came back, every month that they had a meeting there, they would bring out all these points that they did. That started the 70 Naughter group, which became pretty traditional. And they fly 1 week in an airplane, self-survival, in all 70 Naughter airplanes, slower airplanes. And so I joined that group, went with them all over the area, Canada and Kitty Hawk and all those places when they do that week tour, sleeping overnight, paying their own way. And so that's the big event of that thing. That airplane has been all over the eastern coast, but never past Mississippi going west, never. And but I've had Stinsons and I've had Cherokees. I flew in partnership in Indianapolis on Fairchilds. So I always wanted that, and I got it.
Yeah.
And I've had it for years. The manager of the airport here was by accident. It was a group of guys that flew breakfast there every Sunday morning. And when Boyd, the mayor of LaPorte, when they took over the airport, or he got elected, he asked Ed Volk and Jim Fleming, and they were all buddies. And if they would take over the airport in due time and bring it up to where it's at today, which is magnificent. And those two guys, personal friends of mine, Ed is still here, but Jim's gone, and Steve Smith is almost gone. Anyway, that's how we got here. Well, when you grow up in aviation like I did, and when you fly little airplanes and big airplanes like I did, you see all these changes. You learn with it. I remember when VORs came in. I said I'll never be able to master that, and I fought for it. I didn't like this electronic stuff. I was used to the dead reckoning and all that. But you go along with it. When I came here, we had 2,600 feet, hard surface, cracked, and all that. That's when Boyd, the mayor, Ed Spoke and Fleming and Jim and Stan Crimp to be in charge of the airport under commission, which they eventually were. That was probably in 68 or 69, when they were all young kids, basically. And so they progressed with it. And 250 South out here was going through, all the way through. And Jim Fleming owned it. He built Aero Metals, which was in a car garage there on Washington Street. You know, I remember that one. And they all flew breakfast every Sunday morning. And it was weedy. All this area here was on weeds. And finally, when Harrison took over the 10-year mortgage on it, not mortgage, contract on it, he put it in corn and changed the crops. Okay, well, when his contract was up, the commission, at that time was the commission, they wanted me to come over here, and they were going to build a building over here. They wanted me to come in and manage that for the board, not the contractor, because Bill Beach was a contractor for a couple more years. And so I was a part-time manager and doing my own business. And that's how I got into this thing. Then when the contract was up, they went to a authority, which has their own tax base now. And so they had more money and more control and more plans. And being an ambitious, smart attorney, Ed Book has always been the president from that day, well, from the time they started. Of course, now he's still here, I understand. But the five of us have made this into what it is today. Of course, I've been going 10 years now. I'm out at the airport almost 2 times, 3 times a week. But because that big, long brown hangar over there belongs to me until 2040. I'll be 111, so I'll quit then. And then it goes back to the city. Yeah, everything's good as to me has happened by chance, and I've seen an opportunity and I pushed it. We flew breakfast every Sunday morning, and all this stuff. Went to Oshkosh every year. Camped out the whole week there. And the Aero Club was a big event. It was came back from breakfast one morning, and I told the guys over on the other side, before this was anything ever built, that I had to go home and make calls because every time we gave a family hayride for our Sunday morning breakfast people, they some of them couldn't make it because they made prior arrangements. And so I said, I got to go home early for the hayride. And this was almost 2 months earlier. And as I was leaving there, they said, well, why don't you do this? Why don't you make a flying breakfast groups or something to help you do all this? And everybody knows it. I said, good idea. And I went down and we called all the flying breakfast people, and we do that every month anyway. Take the wives out and wine and dine them, Anyway, we went down there, and I said, well, what we're going to do here is get a flying breakfast, flying breakfast group, and no president, no vice president, no nothing like that, but just a group, and have an organized situation. But it turned out to be flying breakfast is fibbers, and we can't have that. And so we went to LaPorte Aero Club. We thought we were the first, but we weren't. We were the third. And the Aero Club now has got documentation. It's a nice group. We got a good savings account. We sponsor aviation-orientated type students every year. We put on a flying breakfast, which is the best. A couple, 3 of them are competing now, but we're the best breakfast there is. And so I'm proud that I did that. Mm-hmm. And it's all by chance, really. And other great things was we had a lot of tie-down airplanes. So Ed Volk, Fleming, and Steve Smith, and Stan Krimp, which was on the commission, and then on the board of authority. So, well, we need to do this. Make contracts that somebody invests money and build a building, pay land rent on it for 25 years, and then give it to the city. Sound like a good deal if you put it on the computer. And so we did. I was the first one to build an independent building, and that was because Stan Krimp, one of the board members, kept trying to get me to go with him on a tail dragger, big trail dragger like a Stinson. And I told him, no, I don't need a Stinson. I've flown them things all my life, and I don't need one. And so eventually he found a deal, a real good one, so we bought him. And my airplane needed a fabric job, so I had it apart downtown redoing it. And so we put the Stinson in my hangar over there, and hangars were a priority then. And so when my airplane was done, the Stinson had to go outside. And that's what created that big, long building. Need to do it. So that started this process of people building airplanes on the airport under these conditions. It's going on today, every place. The Air Club, my hangar wasn't built when the Air Club was started. It was started in '76, second Tuesday of the month, which is our normal take the girls out and wine and dine them, Hey, they look forward to that. They really, really did. And so we had our stuff in everybody's hangar, whatever stuff we accumulated for our breakfasts and all that stuff. Then when we built the hangar in '82, big tall one over there, we started having the spring, summer, and fall dinners there. And the tables, the long tables that I bought from the church when they updated, was still over there, packed away. And every month we had our meetings there, and on this side of the building, we had parties, a fire pit, and 2 of the benches are still there today. And then that's when a little after that's when I started working off and on part-time for the airport.
How many years did you work here?
I don't know, I never even counted, 18, 19, something like that, in conjunction with the part-time, you want to call it part-time, because all I did was, although they call me airport manager, I can't be because we already contracted for, I think, about 2 more years to another company. But anyway, adding all that together is about 18. Buildings here were built in 89, I think it was. When I ran the airport every third or fourth Sunday. And Sundays is a slow day on the terminal building here. And a lot of people would come here and I would visit with them and work with them. A lot of the members, charter members of the Air Club now, I met here as students. And I'd give them some answers. They'd ask me questions and they wanted to live my life. They found out that I flew on the 70 tour every year, and they want to know this, and of course we got talking about that, and we sit over here at a big table and go over the charts where we go, and I tell a lot of stories. I got a good memory. It goes back to 3 years old, so I remember so much that happened during my life, and I remembered being a little dirt farmer when we moved to a farm with a windmill that run a pump. That was great. And had a kitchen pump in the kitchen that you could pump water. That was great. So I forgot the question now.
Advice to pass along to someone.
Oh yeah, to younger kids. Things that's not in the book. I mean, to get a license today is really a chore. I mean, you feel like you went to college, and you tested strongly. It's the reason the airplanes are so safe and the pilots are safe. There's nothing wrong with that. It's so much different than when I was young. But I tell them these other stories, like when you're taking off on a grass strip and there's trees on the other end, but they're a long ways down there. And you're going to fly off of the strip. And you pull back to get off the ground, then you look at the top of them trees, the first row of trees that you see. You have a tendency to pull back on the controls when you get closer to them more and more and more. If you look at the first row of the trees, as soon as you see the second row behind it, you got the first row made. Let up on your controls. It's not in the book no place, but it saved a lot of airplanes by this eagerness, and this goes for everything else. Could be a water tower out there and a cloud. Okay? What's the cloud move in relationship to the water tower? As it moves, you've got the water tower made. Don't be afraid of it. And that's a tendency, one of the bigger points that I try to tell the kids on this panic type, pulling back under control, worsening the situation. But a lot of them are old-time pilots, and they haven't done all this. I must have over 7,000 hours. When you got 3,000, almost 3,500 in one airplane, and you owned all these different kinds. But encouraging them. The Air Club sponsors them in $1,000 a year when they're in college, which was a big deal back then when we started doing it, but it's not so much money now. And but that's about it. I remember one young man was a line boy here, and he worked for me, and he was a college student, and he had graduated, I guess. I can't remember all the details. But anyway, he applied for this Naval Academy out west for aviation. And of course, he was 201, and they only take 200, and so he's out. So he was disappointed, and I had to talk to him about that quite a bit of time. And so his mother came in here and said they just called and gave him 72 hours to pack up and get out there because they've had 2 cancellations. He was ecstatic. He didn't know how to give me 2-week notice, but he only had 72 hours. So I said, well, just tell your mother you're fired right now. And he come back after a year out there and thanked me for firing him. Anyway, I guess, anything else?
Do you remember when that United flight landed here? That a United flight, like in the 50s maybe, that landed here because there was high winds. Were you here then?
Oh, yeah, I was. It wasn't a United flight. It was a commercial flight, and what they were hauling was Class D dynamite. Is that the one you're talking about? It was a twin beach. It was a gusty February wind, crosswind, and knowing how tail draggers are difficult to land, especially a twin beach, and 2,600 feet in a gusty crosswind, I had to watch this. I was at the airport, just loafing in February because my business is very slow first 3 months. So I watched him, and he came in and did a perfect one-wheel landing, second wheel landing, tail down. Turned around, I said, man, he is good. I didn't know anything about him, except he had me to call a number and tell him he would be there in 32 minutes. Okay? 32 minutes, I'll be there. All right. Anyway, here comes a truck with dynamite on it, Class D. Still didn't know what it was. Anyway, then I found out when they was reloading it, these guys get out of this twin beach in snowmobile outfits and boots and gloves and stuff. I thought, well, they had heaters bad or something like that, but they're not allowed to use any of that type of stuff when you fly dynamite, any kind of explosive material. And they, 2 young men had been in service. They were accumulating money to open up their own FBO. And that bought that twin beach, and they were flying dynamite and pocketing all the money. And while they were there loading and all that, making telephone calls, collect calls to everybody, where they're going next, what they're doing this and that and the other. Anyway, when they took off, it didn't have that much weight in it, maybe like 300 pounds of dynamite or something. But I watched them go down the end of the runway and then pull off. They were professionals. To land in that condition, they had to be top notch. And that's what their story was. At this twin beach, there was this B-17 that was out here. I flew that 29 minutes when they were doing the holding stuff. When they put the new engine in it, they had to stay within the range of this airport for 25 hours on the time before they were okay to fly cross country. So Jim Fleming, myself, Ed Volk, I think, was involved in this, got to fly left seat of a B-17. What a monster. And so I got 29 minutes and pictures of it and all that stuff. So that was quite an experience. My favorite airplane is the DC-3, a freighter. And I've dreamt about that 50 times. That when I got out of service, I got 12 and a half years as a military police in the Army. Nothing to do with flying, legally, that is. But I've never been in the thing except when they're sitting on a ramp. Now, that's a big airplane, but it's an old-time freighter built in the 30s, because they made them during the war. And there was a big parachute airplane, a big freighting airplane. And that was one of my favorite multi-engine airplanes. But I've never been flying in one. I miss that. But that airplane was capable of landing in the pasture and taking off. All them DC-3s were.
Anything you want to add, or?
Not really. I've been away from the airport since '02. That's when I retired. It's been a long time and things have changed here, but still basically the same. This section here, they had a window here and a window there and a block wall in the middle, and I witnessed all this. And the board has given me a tremendous amount of history and authority, and I know I've did it. I could go on and talk about the airport forever. Well, the Brown Hangar has had the East Side group, Aero Club, which about everybody belonged to it, and we've had parties and parties and parties and parties over there, and never caused any problems or any trouble. It's only when some foreigner comes in, and one guy came in there and we were doing balloon, where you release hydrogen, small balloons, and we had this all worked out so everything was safe, under pattern and all this stuff. And this clown come in and he was going to join in. He seen what we were doing. He just joined in. And he had a T-craft and ended up chasing a balloon, missed the first pass, did another miss. Then he ended up actually falling into the north hangar of the big hangars, and he survived it during one of our meetings, one of our times. That's the most exciting thing. And underneath of it was a new red Corvette that a guy parked over there. He didn't want nobody around it. And the airplane crashed about 30 feet from it. But the guy stalled it out and crashed into the roof, and the roof was a lightweight roof. It took the impact, the airplane rolled off, and then went in one wing into ground, which then broke off slowly, and that's the only thing that saved his life. That's the only. Patty Wagstaff used to practice out here. She's an aerobatic award winner now, but she used to practice out here. I want her to come back and practice more when she was in the competition, not being famous like she is now. I watched a lot of history being made right here in this room right here, being involved in it. And airports, it looks like it's a dormant tax loss. It is not. It is not, let me tell you. It is one of the most important things to industry to have a perfect airport. And that's the way it's been. It is today. Beautiful. In the beginning, when New York and California and all the points in between were isolated by Pony Express, and the airplanes came into vision, they started flying it, which is much faster. But flying at night was not something that they liked to do, but they learned to do it. And they finally progressed, the mail did, so much that they had to make some way of being able to fly at night for not only safety, but to make sure that they're going the right direction. And so they had air routes, and we had a framework here with the original charts with the beacons all on it. And you could actually, when I started flying, and even recently, you could fly airport to airport with the beacon lights at night. Then the ADF came in, the radios, and then they started bypassing that. But it made a good runway airport marker beacon at night, and so it kept it up. And that one over there was built in the 20s, and it's still functioning. Now, when I was here, they tried to take the top out of it and put on this modern stuff, and I refused. And I notice now that the beacon is up there now is the old-fashioned style. However, it's not as big. Is this true or not?
I thought it was still the same light. We
Huh?
had to get a new light recently, but it still works the same.
Well, I know, but the big dome, is that the original?
Oh, I don't know.
Well, that's what they wanted to get their hands on by selling the board the modern strobe lights. I climbed that beacon at least 12 times a year with them 500-watt bulbs in it, my pockets, the packet, and I'd climb up there and change the bulbs on them, and they didn't last that long. They had in the Aero Club right now, when they took down and put a new system in that I had created at a shop for the new bulbs, okay, I got the old guts of the old system over in the Aero Club with new bulbs, big long Canon bulbs. Yeah, that was quite a deal. And I'm just shocked that it thing looks as good as today as it did when I came in here in '69. Yeah, my great granddaughter used to talk to it. We'd have our parties up there, and all the family knew my three little girls, and we camped out there once a year. And I'd bring the RV out there, and then all of them would sleep in there and have a good time. When we talk about little girls now, and so Megan always had to go by and talk to Mr. Beacon, which when she's a little girl, and also kiss the airplanes, the props. Oh yeah, that's a tradition. And so we were talking about it at a campfire. The whole family was around this big campfire over there. And one smarty guys, personal friends of mine, said, "Hey, Beacon, hey, Megan, you still talk to the Mr. Beacon?" "Yes." "Come here and tell me." "You do?" "Yeah, I talk every time." And said, "What's the Mr. Beacon say?" I don't know. It's Beacon talk." And everybody just started laughing. But anyway, right now, I tried in the beginning to rig up lights for the beacon for Christmas, for a light tree. And third time, Dave Nelson and Chris Hunt and one of the other guys helped me do it this, I don't know, six years ago, I think it was. Finally made lights. And so we got it all set up now, so it takes about 30 minutes for Nelson and I to hook the lights up, turn them back on the timer out of the Aero Club building, and light up the Christmas tree. And we always said then, it's the tallest Christmas tree in Indiana, which is not true, but almost true. And Steve Smith is on the board. And I met him when we were having dinner at Crystal's one evening, and hadn't seen him for a while or something. And so I told him, I said, "Hey, going to the airport." "What for?" "Just drive down I Street to the airport. And then when you get there, call me, tell me what you think." I wouldn't tell him what it was. He had never seen the lights on. And so he went back there and he was ecstatic. Everybody was. And so I don't know what's going to happen this coming year, but Nelson has took it up last year. I don't think I was able to do it last year, or help him even. But the year before I did. I did, didn't I, Pat? Yeah, I did last year. And it's all in the brown building, which we call in a barrel. So you got to take that barrel and that box up to the beacon, and 25 minutes later you got the lights on. And it's all on a timer. And so it's a great thing. Your board okayed that. The FAA okayed that. I called Craig Trini over in Chicago, and I said, any problem me doing this? No problem. Well, that beacon actually belongs to the government. And we're supposed to maintain it and care for it, but I can't do anything with it, change light bulbs.